Greetings, everybody. I'm Jeff Kia, your host, one of the IASIU directors here, and it's been a bit since we've done one of our podcasts. This is the SIU Today Podcast, part of the Education and Certification Committee. And today, my guest is Bob Smith, one of the original founding fathers of IASIU, which started actually way back in 1984. Bob was one of the original founding members. He was with IASIU from roughly 84 to 2003. I didn't realize it had been that long since I was going through the history. I was like, golly, these keeps peering up on the history page. He was a director, treasurer, secretary, vice president, and actually the president. So, like a lot of us have worn all the hats in ISU or their local state chapters. His career span with Omaha PNC, Metropolitan PNC at the time, Nationwide, and the National Insurance Crime Bureau. So, Bob, welcome. Thank you very much for being on my podcast. And we'll go straight into questions if that works for you.
It does. I appreciate the invite, and listening to all that made me feel a little old.
Yeah, right. So the first question is like, what did insurance fraud investigations look like before ISU really even existed?
Wow, nothing like they do today, Jeff. And I mean, if you can imagine having no computer, no electronics or technological support, other than the old index cards, and there's some out there that probably remember those, with prior claims, if we were fortunate. We had handwritten claim file, activity notes, loss report, maybe a police report, a recorded statement on a cassette, and I'm talking about the bigger cassettes. And some of that could take a month or two just to get. And any activity we had, we'd have to jump in a car, head to a neighborhood, an accident scene, a courthouse. And we got into a time period where we actually could have our own PC. And once we had that, we could start typing our reports instead of handwriting them. We created logs. There was real basic stuff that we had back then. But again, having no electronics, no computer at all, it's kind of like comparing the Flintstones to the Jetsons,
right?
In the fraud fighting world at that time.
Yeah. I mean, I came in the claims in around like 2000 and still had some of the paper files. And that was, that's how you could tell if somebody was organized in a claim file. You wouldn't even have to go through it. You'd pick up those, those tabbed old school files. And if you could throw it across the room and nothing came out of it, you knew that investigation was usually going to be pretty sound.
Yeah.
So, what problems were you and the founders really trying to solve when ISU was created?
Well, there were a lot of things that we wanted to do, but I guess one of the biggest things was communication and collaboration. We didn't even have access to what companies had today. We didn't know which companies had an SIU or even a dedicated investigator. Trying to compare MOs, share tactics, how to track intercompany players, educational opportunities, and so forth. But we didn't even know who the SIU people were in some of those companies. And we thought, if we were at an IADI conference or IAAI, that's how you ended up getting to meet some of those investigators. Or you call an American Family, and do you have an investigator on your staff? And after getting transferred around 3 or 4 times, I ended up, that's actually a true story, talking to a gentleman by the name of Bill Lundy with American Family. And same thing with USAA, Don Nettle. So we started kind of going back and forth, and it's like, we ought to get together with the people that we do know and try to solidify some of the needs that we find that are different than claims, different than law enforcement, excuse me, and to try to put some of those mechanics together. We wanted to instill a sense of professionalism, ethics. When we drew up the original, back then it was actually NASIU, the national, before we went international. we tried to incorporate those things into a framework that would be a bedrock and it would last. But we also knew things would change. But some of those basics were and still are to this day a standard. And we're talking about education, kind of like this podcast, awareness, networking. Those are things that were, are, and hopefully will continue to be vital.
Absolutely. So, it's funny, we have all the link analysis and this stuff nowadays. What's something that the younger generation SIU investigators would never believe about how SIU work used to be done?
Yeah, that you hit on a couple of them there. I mentioned we didn't have any computers, no internet, no social media, no cell phones, video access like Teams, WebEx, Zoom, no YouTubes, no access to other company informations and investigators. Um, that was probably one of the biggest things that we had to overcome. And I'll tell you, when the faxes started coming out, we were excited.
Oh yeah.
Cut down on
Yeah.
time frames, being able to communicate, send something to somebody and get a response back the same day instead of waiting for snail mail. I mean, those little things that we took for granted. Now it's hard to find somebody with a fax machine. We've got internet. We've got those, electronic communications that we look at, use daily. So having that at your fingertips, and we'll talk about that a little bit, I'm sure, in the future here. Those kind of things that we take for granted today were not in existence. So we had to find ways to try to do things because you want to conduct your investigations in a prompt, thorough, fair, unbiased, and professional manner always. And without having some of those tools in your toolbox, it was tough. So those are the kind of things we look to improve on, and being able to talk to each other, collaborate, and get some of those ideas from here to here. It took time, but it was worth it.
Yeah. So kind of in that same vein, what do you think has been like the biggest change in fraud investigations over the last 40 years?
It's got to be technology. Investigators today can do more behind a keyboard, probably in a half an hour, than we could have done in a day in the field, visiting a police department, going to an accident scene, going to a courthouse. And for anybody who's ever visited a courthouse and had to physically go through those docket logs, and I mean, those books were about 2 foot wide, about 3 foot long. And if somebody who wrote in them was having a bad day and you couldn't read it, it was guesswork. And now it's electronic. It's available to us. Finding and memorializing data, critical data, link analysis that you mentioned, those things didn't exist. And now you can do that in a matter of minutes or a couple hours. So you get to know who you're dealing with. Who are those players? Being able to generate reports, and it is and will continue to be an absolute game changer. Technology.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I tell people, like one of my past leaders at Esurance, Bob Klein, who's now retired, like you. Bob Klein had a saying, and I can't remember where he got it from. It's like, get off your butts and knock on some doors. And you tell that to these desk investigators nowadays. Like, well, what do you mean? It's like, hey, that TLO report that you generate in about 0.5 seconds. Yeah, that was like 2 days of field work for us back in the day, where you had a field car, you'd go down the courthouse and you do all that sort of stuff. And you start talking about, okay, well, why don't you go canvass the neighborhood? And like, what do you mean? Like you're going to go out, you're going to knock on doors, and you're going to interface with the general populace, and you get to see some of the wonderful areas that we get to go investigate, right?
Boy, you hit it right on the head. I can't tell you how many pair of wingtip soles I wore out walking.
Oh, absolutely.
Just what you're talking about.
And you think a lot of this is like it's vended stuff, and God bless our vended staff, but I mean, it was, you would do something, you'd go talk to a body shop and like, well, okay, yeah, we don't have this lift when they would start name dropping other people. Well, then you would immediately go to that other person, and no one got a heads up, so no one could intel share. So, you know, what concerns you most about the future of fraud?
I'm trying to get those flashbacks out of my mind now, but I guess it would probably be maintaining corporate commitment to a solid anti-fraud program. Greed and imagination feed fraud, and it goes from not just claims fraud. You have to look at from like point of sale all the way through the claims process. As long as the bad guys can make money, they're going to continue to pursue fraudulent activities, and that probably will never change. So we have to, as an industry, continue to have that commitment from the top down to make sure that we maintain a solid anti-fraud program. Make it harder for the bad guys. Some have probably heard me tell it's a real brief story, but working with some law enforcement years ago, they served a search warrant, and one of the file cabinets was a drawer. In that drawer, there were names of insurance companies, and they were in file folders, and they were categorized in one of two ways: good companies, bad companies. The good companies were those who didn't ask a lot of questions. Send in a request, get a paycheck. Send in it was a free flow of money. The bad companies were doing what we were just talking about, Jeff. You're knocking on doors. You're doing a neighborhood canvas. You're going to the chiropractor office. You're doing all these things. Well, those were bad companies because it's like throwing sand in grease. You have to have a solid commitment to keep going forward, because things are they're going to change, just like they have over the last 40 years. They're going to continue to change, but you need to have that commitment that says we're going to pay our valid claims. Absolutely. Those that aren't valid, we have to continue to look at.
Absolutely. So you were one of the original founding fathers. So thank you so much for all that hard work initially getting this thing off the ground. So when you think about what ISU has become today, what makes you the most proud?
Working with some of those guys I mentioned, Bill and Don, they were forward thinkers. And I thank them so much for allowing, at the time, a kid like me to get in there. We saw a phenomenal increase in membership, and that was big. But the collaboration between not only each other, but with our law enforcement, our fraud bureau, NICB, coalition partners, we grew not only in just numbers, but stature and respect. And I think that was one of the bigger things that we always looked at is we want to do things, but we want to do it right. And we grew not only just here in the U.S., but worldwide. We pushed for things like professionalism, ethical behavior, and IASIU. I've still got some shirts that I wear proudly. And I can remember being in Texas, in Arizona, in California, and even in Washington State. And somebody saw my shirt and was like, hey, and it makes you proud, because they said, hey, I can't do my job right without having, those kind of tools available to me. So when you're looking at things like education and networking, the collaboration, those are the kind of things that I think we're most, at least I am so proud of. And I've mentioned collaboration several times, and I think that's one of the big things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so I want to put my 2 cents on there too, about ISU. So I used to chair the website committee, and we run the data, and like if you didn't know, ISU has a membership directory, right, of all other ISU members working at other carriers. So if you want to, you have a claim with company X, you can search by name, state, you can search by the carrier name, and we have the immunity statutes that protect us in a lot of states. And so to me, like ISU is such a great organization for the networking, for the education. We put on 2 webinars a month. We host a great conference that's about around 1,000 members. This year it's in Orlando in I think September. But we think about the ISU conference of what it really is. Like what other organization or line of work can you go to that has a conference of like 1,000 people that's run by, it's a 4,000 member organization that's entirely volunteer run. People are always like, how much do you guys get paid? I'm like, we don't get paid. We get a meal at the end of the day, but we do this for, it's that servant leadership that we give back to the community, that we train other people. How many other places, if you work in x-rays, you go to conference and you start training other people. So I'm really proud of what we've become. We have a great board that I work with right now. I'm proud to be a part of it. So like in closing, right, what would be some advice you would give our next generation of SIU investigators?
Oh, yeah, those are great things to keep in mind, Jeff. I guess it would be, don't just sit on your hands. Get involved. Think outside the box. Network. Those conferences. I went to the first 30 or whatever it was before COVID. Never missed one, and those were so valuable. And the
Yeah.
basics are always going to be there. And I applaud Amy Stidham. She had a comment in I think it was the winter 2025 SIU Today. It talked about getting back to basics, things like education, awareness, and networking. But get involved. Yesterday's or today's greatest concept doesn't mean it's always going to be the greatest, because you got tomorrow and you got the next year. So share what you've learned. Earn respect. That's a biggie. Earn respect in your workplace, and above all, maintain impeccable integrity. Never compromise your integrity. That particular trait defines us all,
Right.
and it's invaluable as a portrait of who you are.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. That's why I recommend to people too. That, people always, you come to us like, why don't I want to be more involved? Like, I've been doing this for a year or 2 or 5 years, whatever, and I want to start giving back, or being a leader in the industry. I'm like, get involved with your local chapter. Like, you don't may not want to go join IASU right off,
Yeah.
go into the deep end, but get to your local chapters. We can help you, get to that spot. Get involved in your local chapter. Be a director. Help organize the state conference that you live in. And the next you're on the ISU board serving as a director. Next you're president, and you're the next Amy Stidham, right? So
Sure.
one of my good friends. So yeah, thank you very much for all the wonderful comments and all the good answers to the questions. We've really enjoyed having you on here, and we'll see you next time. Once again, thanks for being our guest, and we'll see you all next time.
My pleasure. Thank you, Jeff. And I wish everyone out there the very best.
Thank you.